Have you ever wondered what a capon is? I actually thought it was a fruit of some kind, though I may have been thinking of capers. I don't know. But now I do know, because today we're going to be making sweet measure. Capons in milk and honey. It's a savory dish colored gold with saffron. Truly a meal fit for a king. Sweet measure has quite a list of ingredients. First and foremost, a capon. But I don't have a capon, so I'm using a chicken. And I'll explain why in a little bit. But whether you're using capon or chicken, you'll need 3 to 4 pounds cut into serving-sized pieces. 1/2 cup of flour mixed with 1/8 teaspoon of fresh pepper and 1/2 teaspoon of salt, then mix it all together. 3 tablespoons of oil, 3 cups of milk, 1/3 cup of honey, 3 tablespoons minced fresh parsley, 2 small leaves of fresh sage, minced, 1 teaspoon hyssop, 1/2 teaspoon savray, 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of saffron, another 1/2 teaspoon of salt, another 1/8 teaspoon of pepper, and 1/3 cup of pine nuts. Before you get started, preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 Celsius. First, dredge the fowl in the flour mixture. Then brown the pieces in oil in a large, heavy saucepan until golden on both sides. Next, combine the milk, the honey, the herbs, salt, and pepper in a bowl. Layer the chicken or capon into a deep saucepan or casserole dish or anything that can go into the oven. Then pour the milk and honey mixture over the fowl and cover the dish. And simmer in the oven for about 20 minutes, or until the fowl is nice and tender. Now while that's simmering in the oven, let me tell you why I chose to use chicken and not a capon. The capon is a cock, made as it were female by carving away of his gendering stones. Bartholomeus Anglicus. While it's clear that dear Bartholomeus doesn't understand how gender works, you get the gist. The chicken. But why would they do that? The history there is a little murky, but the earliest known reason that we have comes from the Lex Fauna, a series of Roman laws put in place during a drought in 162 BC. Among other things, the law forbade the fattening of chickens because it was seen as a waste of grain, so some enterprising young poulterers instead castrated their roosters because that made them grow quite a bit larger. The poultry went out of fashion during the fall of the Roman Empire, probably because who has time to worry about mutilating chickens when you're more worried about a Visigoth mutilating you? But by the 14th century, things had calmed down and people went back to snipping their chickens. Capons became most popular with the wealthy classes, probably due to their size, their tenderness of meat, and their complete lack of a gamey flavor. Monks were credited with having a particular weakness for the bird, but by the end of the 14th century it was all the rage to mock and ridicule monks for their sloth and greed, so you have to kind of take that with a grain of salt. Even in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, the monk, the friar, the pardoner, and the prioress are definitely seen as symbols of wealth and greed rather than humility and piety. Now amongst the wealthy, capons were so prized that they often played centerpiece to medieval feasts, like the sweet measure we're making today, which is colored gold with precious saffron, though that pales in comparison with the legendary Cockentrice. The Cockentrice was a Frankenstein-style dish where you would take the front end of a suckling pig and tie it to the back end of a capon. Then you would stuff it full of meat and roast it, then color it gold with saffron. One of these days, I want to make that, so I'm saving my capon for that day. Now there were more down-to-earth recipes for capon, namely in France, where the writer François Rabelais mentioned his favorite capons coming from Le Mans. They were fattened with maslin and aromatic herbs to give their flesh a better flavor. And still to this day, champons du Mans, capons from Le Mans, are served at Christmas dinners all over France. It was probably a simpler dish like this that King Henri IV had in mind when he wished for a poule à pot in every house on Sundays. And it was probably chickens rather than capons that most people had, and that's why I'm using a chicken, because I have a lot more in common with a medieval French peasant than I do a medieval French king. Even today, to order a capon, it's going to cost you about $75 for a bird. That's why I'm using chicken. Let's get back to it. Once the fowl is nice and tender, remove it from the oven and stir in the pine nuts. Then, serve it forth. I served the sweet measure on the traditional medieval trencher that I made in the last episode, so I'll put a link down in the description to where you can see that. Now, as you can see from my abrupt costume change, I am filming this on a different day than I filmed everything else in this video. And that is because, since I made this video, I have realized that people actually want to see me taste the food. It's called tasting history. I'm a little slow on the uptake. But I didn't film myself tasting the sweet measure. So suffice it to say, it was sweet, a little bit savory, extremely tender, and frankly, it was just delicious all around. And I even, being the peasant that I am, tasted the trencher, and after soaking up a bunch of milk and honey, that was pretty good too. Anyway, thank you so much for the feedback. Again, I will always include me tasting food from now on. I appreciate any suggestions that you have. I'm trying to make this channel better, so thank you. Make sure to subscribe, like this video, and I will see you next time on Tasting History.